Fear changes how people move through their own neighborhoods. It makes them quicken their pace past certain houses. It makes them ignore the yelling, the smell, the people coming and going at hours that really don't make any sense. It makes them decide that whatever is happening over there isn't worth getting involved in, not because they don't see it, but because stepping into someone else's chaos feels worse than pretending that it isn't there to begin with. And once a person or a place gets that sort of reputation, it's kind of hard to shake. People stop knocking. They stop checking in. They stop asking questions. A house can sit in the middle of a community and still feel like it's sitting on its own island. Everyone knows something is off, but no one wants to be the person who finds out just exactly how off it actually is.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
Did you know that there is such a thing called a sick house? Now, this isn't a place where the sick go to be treated or, to say, die from illnesses. Rather, these are places or homes where the environment has deteriorated so severely that it becomes hazardous to the people living in them, not just physically, but psychologically and socially. This term is used by public health, but it's also a criminology concept. Professionals use the term when a home shows extreme environmental neglect. This includes rotting food, human or animal waste, and in many cases it's both, garbage accumulation that borders on hoarding, infestations, structural decay, non-functioning plumbing or electricity, and in many cases this also includes both of those, rooms that can't be used, and poor air quality that is so bad that it causes illness. Think of the show Hoarders, but on steroids. A lot of this overlaps with what is known as Diogenes syndrome. It's a severe behavioral disorder characterized by extreme self-neglect, domestic squalor, social withdrawal, often the refusal of help, and the compulsive hoarding of garbage or animals. And again, often it's both. Research has shown that these homes are strongly linked to self-neglect and mental illnesses, with the top contributors being severe depression and substance use. But it can also include psychosis. There is social isolation, poverty, deprivation, and cognitive decline. In some cases, there is a frontal lobe impairment or dementia that's involved, which affects judgment and basic care. In many cases, people have lived stable lives before things start to deteriorate. So think of a sick house kind of as the symptom of several underlying issues. The problem with a sick house, aside from the obvious, is that they create this enclosed ecosystem where normal social rules break down. Outsiders stop entering the home, which means that dangerous behaviors go unchecked. The people living in these ecosystems become desensitized to the filth, decay, and danger, and the threshold for what feels unsafe drops, meaning that violence or exploitation can escalate. Because many people in this state refuse help or avoid contact altogether, the situation usually stays hidden until something immediate draws attention from the outside. Part of criminology looks at what happens when an environment breaks down. We know that crime goes up in places with poverty, instability, and weak institutions like school structure. When the structure around the people stops working, antisocial behaviors go unchecked. And the strange thing is that this keeps happening even when the people living in there change, so someone moves and a new person moves in. And this really does tell you that the environment is doing most of the work rather than the people impacting it. Once the environment itself collapses, the behavior inside of it collapses too. And if that's what happens to an entire neighborhood, you can picture what it looks like when the collapse is happening in the tightest possible space, inside a single home. Criminology has a label for homes where the environment collapses and the worst offenses take place inside of them. They call them houses of horror. Prime example is the Robert Pickton case from British Columbia, Canada. His property sat on a muddy stretch of farmland with outbuildings in various stages of decay. Investigators found garbage, animal waste, and discarded material across that entire site. The environment made it easy for people to disappear into the property without being noticed. The state of the farm meant that evidence blended into the mess around it. Picton had used that space for years while women went missing in Vancouver's downtown east side. The conditions of the property didn't cause him murdering a bunch of women, but it did create a place where no one questioned what was actually happening there. Fred and Rosemary West lived at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester. The house had structural changes that weren't ever inspected, including hidden rooms and makeshift spaces in the cellar. The property had ongoing maintenance issues and a level of clutter and disarray that kept most people out. Several victims were buried on the property, including in the cellar and the garden. The state of the home made it possible for the West to control who entered and who didn't. The environment inside the house allowed their crimes to continue for years without any outside interference. Josef Fritzl's case in Amsterdam is another example. He built a basement complex beneath his home with narrow corridors, low ceilings, and poor ventilation. The space had damp walls, limited lighting, and makeshift electrical wiring. He kept his daughter and the children that he forced her to have in the basement for 24 years. The conditions inside the underground rooms meant that no one from the outside saw or heard anything. The environment created a sealed space where Fritzl controlled every part of daily life. These cases show what criminologists mean when they talk about houses of horror. When the environment inside the home breaks down, the people inside lose the outside world as a point of reference. And if this is what happens in a farm, a townhouse, or in a basement complex, you can picture what it looks like when the collapse is happening inside a single-family home with no oversight at all. And all of this happened in the home of a man who called himself Pazuzu. San Francisco in the late 70s isn't the city that it is now. It had the Golden Gate Bridge, the fog, the mix of old architecture and new money, and the early signs of the tech boom that would eventually make it one of the most expensive places to live in the United States. Back then, though, Timothy and Cynthia Lawson were two people building their lives there. They married in 1971, and in August of 1978, they had their first and only child, a boy named John Alexander Lawson. He spent his first 2 years in the city before the family moved to North Carolina. John started school at the Forsyth County system and repeated the second grade after falling behind. When he was 8, his parents divorced. His father went back to California, and John stayed in North Carolina with his mother. Cynthia remarried to a man named Johnny James a few years later, and the three of them moved into a house on Nob Hill Drive in Clemens. Household was anything but stable. John started keeping to himself more, and there was this huge tension between him and his stepfather. School didn't get any easier for him. He fought with other kids, skipped classes, and clashed with the teachers. He repeated 9th grade and then eventually dropped out of West Forsyth High School. Classmates called him Diablo. Others called him Turd Boy, a nickname used to mock his hygiene. He didn't go back after leaving school, and he also didn't look for work. By the age of 13, he was drinking heavily, sometimes going through a 12-pack in a day. At the age of 13, a friend later introduced him to methamphetamine not long after this started. His mother took him for psychiatric evaluations, and he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, agoraphobia, depression, and alcoholism, and was prescribed a plethora of medications, from SSRIs to Ativan, but he stopped taking them because he said they made him feel zombie-like. Cynthia said that she tried to keep him in treatment, but the cost of it made it very difficult. Now, the people who knew him when he was young described him as emotional and off-kilter. There were reports of him harming animals and using drugs and alcohol early. As he got older, he started telling different stories about where he came from in his early life. He told some people that he was from Iraq. He told others that his father was a high priest. Now, none of it was the truth of his childhood from North Carolina. In 2002, at 24 years old, John legally changed his name to Pazuzu Algarad. Pazuzu comes from the Mesopotamian demon king, which was widely recognized through the movie The Exorcist. It is the demon that possesses the child Regan in that movie and book. The rest of the name came from Arabic. Allah is a form of the word for God, and Algarad has been interpreted as the god of locusts. After the name change, he started marking his face and body with tattoos tied to the occult, including the number 666, a Polynesian-style chin piece, and knotwork designs. He filed his teeth to points, stopped bathing, and stopped brushing his teeth, telling a psychiatrist that hygiene weakens the body. It was widely believed that he bathed at most once a year. It's unclear when exactly he and his mother moved to Clemens, just outside of the Winston-Salem area, but the neighborhood was known for its strong Christian community. And after his name change, he became somewhat of an instant anti-celebrity. He told people he practiced Satanism, Luciferianism, and older Middle Eastern beliefs. And I want to be really clear here. Nothing he did reflects the beliefs or practices of real Satanists. He ultimately wanted to scare people, and so he played into every stereotype that he could find. He told people that he sacrificed animals, that he could control the weather. He talked about full moon rituals, drinking blood, and eating animal hearts. Now, he changed the details depending on who he was talking to, but the point was always the same. He wanted people to be uncomfortable around him. At one point, he also claimed to have killed and eaten prostitutes. He boasted about people being buried in his backyard. And of course, most people never believed him because he would make things up all the time to get a rise out of people. I mean, this was coming from a guy who claimed he could control the weather. The people who covered his case said that he did everything he possibly could to make himself look frightening. We've already mentioned the tattoos across his face and the filed teeth, but he would also braid metal into his hair. He really leaned into the reaction that he got from the community. Basically, the more people avoided him, the more extreme that he became. So even with his agoraphobia and the anxiety, he did have a group of people that was constantly around him. And as things got worse for him mentally, the house that he shared with his mother started attracting social misfits and outcasts, people who were working class, working poor, or just kind of on the outside of the community. Some of them even consider themselves his followers. People who knew him back then said that he had a strange kind of charisma, not the kind that drew in everybody, but he did resonate with people who were already slipping outside of the mainstream social atmosphere. The house itself was 2749 Nob Hill Drive in Clemens. It was a quiet suburban street just outside of the Winston-Salem area. Now, it did belong to his mother, Cynthia James. After she remarried, the three of them had moved into this place together. Inside, the house fell into extreme squalor. There were feces and animal waste on the floor, trash piled in rooms and hallways, mold spreading across the walls, graffiti everywhere, like pentagrams, symbols, whatever he and his friends felt like spraying on the walls at the time. There were dead animals and bones found inside, including a pet lizard that had been left to rot. Now, the city officials eventually decided that the house was unfit for human habitation because of the filth, the flies, and, well, biohazard. The people who had spent time inside of the house described it as lawless, chaotic, filthy, and full of drinking, drugs, and sex. One Fred said that they would sit around doing heroin, cutting themselves and each other, drinking blood from birds, and calling it, hey, this is just a good time. People came over because they knew that there were no rules. You could smash a TV, throw a knife at the wall, hit someone with a beer bottle, even piss on the carpet, and no one would stop you. It was basically open season inside of the house. Pazuzu kept a rotating group of friends and partners and people who drifted in and out. Basically, if you had no place to go, this was the spot that you went. Now, his main partner was a woman named Amber Burch, who went by Bubbles, and she stayed with him throughout this entire case. They spent time in graveyards doing bloodletting rituals, cutting themselves while drinking at home. His interest kept escalating, and he became interested and obsessed with Charles Manson and started to build his own version of a family. He invited mostly women to live in the house and called them all his girlfriends or his fiancées. Krystal Matlock eventually joined Amber as one of his main partners, and the three of them lived a polyamorous life centered around drugs, rituals, and sex with strangers. Now, his mother, Cynthia, she stayed mostly in her bedroom and the bathroom, and basically let him take over the rest of the house. The people who visited said the place ran on whatever he wanted and whatever the group around him encouraged. And while most of the town kept their distance, rumors started spreading among the people that he hung around. At one point, he claimed to have killed and eaten prostitutes. The rumors mostly consisted that he had buried people in the backyard. Now again, this guy was extremely eccentric and liked to lie and fabricate a lot of things about himself, so most of the people didn't believe any of these things were true. The front door of the house was also covered in stickers. At the top, there was one that said, "No police are welcome," and under that, there was another one taking a shot at anybody who supported the law. And at the bottom, there was a sign that said, "Evil will triumph." For a hot minute, we're going to jump over to Virginia, just north of the North Carolina line. It's 2016, and Josh Wetzler and his wife Stacy have just bought a small farm with plans to rehab and train horses. The two had met a few years earlier, and they were pretty good with horses, so being young and with a plan, this was kind of what they had envisioned as a future together. Josh loved animals. He loved people, too. He was outgoing, kind, and easy to be around. And he liked hanging out with the more free-spirited crowds, but he wasn't reckless. He was just genuine. Not long after they settled into the farm, Stacy found out she was pregnant, and suddenly they had even more to look forward to. But then the recession hit in 2007. Businesses everywhere were collapsing, and the loan that they had been counting on disappeared. By 2008, they were months behind on their mortgage. They had to shut down their entire operation. And once the farm went under, the relationship quickly followed, and they decided to take a break. Stacy, now she found work on another farm, but Josh, he moved into a small trailer, and he couldn't find steady work, so he eventually started selling drugs just to get by. And that was a bad call that only made things worse. Later that year, police raided his trailer on an anonymous tip. He was convicted on drug charges, which made finding honest work even harder, and the whole thing just kind of pushed him deeper into guilt and poverty. Even through all of this, Josh tried to stay hopeful. He'd lost his business and the marriage, but he still had his son, and he and Stacy were still pretty close. They were even talking about trying again. Then in June of 2009, police found Josh's vehicle abandoned in a parking lot. The keys were still in the ignition, the door wasn't fully closed, and the windows were rolled down. After that, he stopped contacting Stacy and everyone else. Police told her about the car, and she assumed that he was laying low because of his charges, so she didn't report him missing. And with that, Josh Wetzler disappeared. We're going to jump a few months ahead to October. There's a man named Tommy Welsh who had plans to meet up with his brother Rusty at Rusty's place. Tommy was 31 and Rusty was 30. Rusty is working a day shift at his local Domino's pizza shop. And the plan was simple. He'd bring home some pizza, and the two of them would catch up over dinner. But when Rusty gets back to his apartment around 6, Tommy isn't there. And this wasn't like him. Tommy was punctual, so Rusty texted. Then he called him. The pizza sat there getting cold, and still nothing. There was no answer, no explanation. The night came and went, and the next morning, still nothing. And then the next day, and the next. Tommy didn't call, he didn't show up, he didn't reach out to anyone. He just disappeared, just like Josh. 3 months later, back over the state line in Clements, North Carolina, back at Pazuzu's place, things had sunken even lower. The house had been sliding for years, but by this point, it was barely functioning as a house. The floors were buried under trash, and the smell would hit you before you even made it through the doorway. And that stench clung to everything. Pazuzu is spending most of his days high, and he's smearing blood on the walls. He's not even bothering to use the bathroom as a bathroom anymore. He just goes on the carpet with people sitting around. And he's still telling the same stories. He can control the weather. There's people buried in the backyard. He's eating prostitutes. And then he says something a little bit different. Now, all the while, he's telling the same crazy stories that he's been telling for years. I can control the weather. I'm from Iraq. My dad's a high priest. I'm a Satanist. Blah, blah, blah. But then he says something a little bit different. He starts talking about a man buried downstairs. Now, he's talked about bodies before, but he's never gone into detail. And now he's saying that he shot this man and left him there in the basement under cat litter and bleach. Now, the people he's telling this to can't make heads or tails or any sense of what he is talking about. He is too high and too out of it. But the next day, one of his friends couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. She had seen a couple of his family members outside with a shovel, and after he started talking about bodies, that whole scene started to sit with her really wrong. So she went to the police. On August 3rd, 2009, she met a detective at a park and told him what she had heard. The officers went to the house. They asked him, "Hey, is this true?" and if they could take a look around. He tells them no, so they left. And it kind of just stalled there. A month later, on September 24th, another tip came in with those same details, and again, nothing came from it. So this friend, she goes back to the house with a tape recorder hidden on her. And while she's there, he and a few others are talking about killing someone. She brings this recording to the police, and still, nothing came from that either. By early 2010, Stacy is now hearing that Josh isn't just missing anymore, he's dead. And the people that she's hearing this from are saying that he's been killed and that his body is at Pazuzu's place. Now, she and Josh are separated, but she still cares about what happened to him. They have a kid together. And so in February, she goes to the police and she tells them what she has heard. That's when police finally get a warrant for the house on Nob Hill Drive. So they go through the place again. This time they even brought cadaver dogs into the yard, walking them over dirt and around the property. But the dogs didn't hit on anything, and so the police left without finding a body. A few months later, on June 7th, a young man named Joseph Emmerich Chandler was found dead in the Yadkin River, shot in the back of the head. Police eventually connect the shooting to Nicholas Rizzi, one of the people who has spent a lot of time at Pazuzu's house. Now, Pazuzu didn't directly murder Joseph, but he did help Nicholas hide the body. And so the courts during this case, they order a full psychiatric evaluation for Pazuzu before moving forward on any charges. The state psychiatrist diagnosed him with schizophrenia, agoraphobia, and alcoholism. The reports describe him as shaking constantly, drinking up to 18 beers a day, barely bathing, not brushing his teeth, and instead filing them down. He told them that he did all of this to keep from getting sick. And even with all of that, they said that he was competent to stand trial. Now, legally, he doesn't walk away from the Chandler case clean. He was charged with an accessory after the fact to involuntary manslaughter for hiding Rizzi at his house. In 2012, he pled guilty and was given a sentence of 10 to 12 months in prison and 5 years of supervised probation. While this is happening, things at the home are becoming violent. In May of 2010, he choked his mother, Cynthia, hard enough that she couldn't breathe, and it scared her bad enough that she goes to the police and she reported it. The charge that he was given was a misdemeanor assault on a female. On August 23rd of 2011, he pled guilty and was put on 12 months probation. Later, Amber also attacked Cynthia. She assaulted her, but Amber was never charged or convicted for it, and Cynthia didn't push it any further. She told people that she was afraid of her son and the things that he was involved in, so she just kind of let it slide. Now, by late September of 2014, the deputies get a call from a woman named Dixie Ross. She told them that Amber Burch had admitted to killing Josh Wetzler years earlier. Around the same time, Pazuzu was hosting another one of his late-night parties at the house on Nob Hill. And at some point in the night, he pulled his friend Matt Flowers aside, and he asks him to help him kill a man who was there. Matt, of course, refuses, and he goes up to this guy and tells him to get out of the house and leave. The next morning, Matt goes to the police and he tells them what happened. Between Dixie's statement and Matt's report, the investigators went back to a judge for another warrant, and they got one. And then they got a second warrant a few days later so that they could actually dig and excavate the property. On October 5th, the deputies cleared everyone out of the house and they go inside. Immediately, they are hit with a rancid smell. There's trash everywhere. The walls and ceiling are covered in graffitis and symbols. There are flies in every single room. Animal waste is mixed with human. There are more than 15 cats inside, along with several dogs, multiple snakes, and other animals that had either been sacrificed or were just living in the mess. In some rooms, the floor wasn't even visible underneath the layers of filth. Mold climbed over the walls and the ceilings where the garbage couldn't reach. The basement was the same, just more rotted. Broken furniture, parts of it open to the outside, and one area was covered in chlorine and cat litter, and that kind of matches that story that Pazuzu was bragging about when he was messed up. So while some of the team is inside documenting everything, others go outside and they start digging, and they find the bodies of 2 men. Both had been exposed to the elements for so long that the forensic team had to take their time to understand what exactly it was that they were looking at. The remains were eventually identified as Josh Wetzler and Tommy Welsh. Both had been missing since 2009, and both were buried separately in their own shallow graves.
Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you.
Once the bodies were uncovered, the investigators were finally able to confirm what actually happened. Josh Wetzler had been killed in 2009. He was 37. Now, he had been spending time at the house on and off, sleeping on the couch and spending time there because, well, he didn't have stable housing. At some point in July, during a dispute while everyone was using drugs and was drinking, Pazuzu shot Josh once in the head inside of the house. He was also high and drunk at the time, and beyond that, there's no clear reasoning as to why he actually shot Josh. What's even more disturbing is after the shooting, Pazuzu walked around wearing Josh's bloody bandana for days, and all of the friends that were there were talking about it. Parts of it were even caught on video. Amber and Krystal helped bury Josh in a shallow grave in the backyard. A few months later, in October of 2009, Tommy Welsh ended up at the house. Amber had picked him up from a gas station and brought him back. The two drank for a while, and at some point during what was later described as a setup tied to a robbery and drug debts, Amber shot Tommy in the back of the head with a .22 caliber rifle while he was sitting on the couch. Paranoia and drug use inside of the group were listed as major factors, and Pazuzu helped bury Tommy in another shallow grave in the yard. During both killings, Cynthia was home. She was physically present inside of the home when each man was murdered. When Tommy was shot, she actually came out of her room and saw Pazuzu standing over his body. But she didn't call the police. She didn't try to stop anything. She was terrified of her son, remember? So she just goes back to her room, got ready for work, and left the house. She never reported the killing either. And even with that, she was never charged. Investigators later said that they couldn't prove that she participated, assisted, or had prior knowledge of the murder. Being present and failing to report it wasn't enough for prosecutors to move forward on any charges with her. On October 5th, 2014, Pazuzu and Amber were both arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and accessory after the fact to murder. 3 days later, Krystal Matlock was arrested and charged with accessory after the fact for helping bury one of the bodies. All 3 were held without bond, and the house was condemned and declared unfit for anyone to live in. In 2015, Amber Burch took a plea deal. During the hearing, prosecutors described her as an active participant, not someone who was pressured or dragged along. They said that she was fully willing to participate in what happened inside of the house, and that she helped keep the violence going. The court called her conduct immoral and dangerous, and said that she had shown herself to be a threat to the community. Amber didn't argue with any of this, but she did tell the judge that she accepted responsibility. She was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and 8 months in prison, with the maximum of almost 40 years. Based on that sentence, she won't be eligible for parole until around 2046. She didn't offer any explanation for why the murders happened, but she did tell the court that she was sorry, and that was kind of the extent of it. Also in 2015, Krystal Matlock pled guilty to accessory after the fact in the murder of Josh Wetzler. In court, prosecutors said that she wasn't an outsider or someone who got swept up in something that she didn't understand. They described her as being fully aware, fully willing, and someone who chose to hide what had happened. The court said that her actions showed a disregard for human life and for the law. She didn't contest any of it. She was sentenced to a minimum of 3 years and 2 months in prison, with a maximum of just over 4 years. She became eligible for release in 2018, and she was released that year. As for Pazuzu, he died in custody on October 28th of 2015, 1 day before he was scheduled to appear in court. He was 36. Officers found him unresponsive in his cell at the Central Prison in Riley during an early morning count. He had deep wounds to his arms and several superficial cuts on his body. The staff tried to revive him, but he was pronounced dead a little after 4 a.m. An autopsy later ruled the death a suicide. The medical examiner said that he died from blood loss after cutting the brachial artery in his left arm. No suicide note was found. Toxology showed only sterline and caffeine. There were no illegal drugs in his system. Now, even with the suicide ruling and the autopsy, the circumstances around his death raised some questions. The prison officials didn't release any details at the time. They didn't say what object was used, whether he was on suicide watch, whether he had a history of attempts, and that silence fueled public speculation, including from people interviewed in the documentary The Devil You Know. They were not fully convinced that the full story had been told. Pazuzu had been moved to Central Prison months earlier on a safekeeping order. He was housed in general population, and officers checked cells hourly. He had refused plea deals and was still awaiting trial on 2 counts of first-degree murder and accessory after the fact. After his death, the charges were dismissed because the prosecution could no longer continue. The families of the victims had mixed reactions. Some felt relief that he could no longer hurt anyone, and others were frustrated that he never faced trial. Pazuzu's self-styled demonic persona fed directly into the media frenzy that followed the discovery of the bodies. Reporters leaned into the idea of a satanic cult, even though the reality was far more mundane and far more tragic. Journalist Patricia Gillespie said that early coverage focused on shock value instead of the actual facts, because, well, sex and violence sells. She said that it was far easier for the public to imagine brides of Satan than to look at the abuse and poverty and neglect that shaped the house on Nob Hill Drive. His theatrics also revitalized old satanic panic narratives. The people viewed his face tattoos and took in his talks about demon as proof of occult violence, echoing the fears of the 1980s. In reality, his behavior was a mix of untreated mental illness, drug use, and self-mythologizing. He built a persona to feel powerful, and the people around him fed into it. Criminologists point to cases like this as examples of how marginalized offenders create symbolic identities to control their environment and attract followers. Some compare him to a small-scale Charles Manson, not because of the ideology, but because he used a constructed persona to manipulate vulnerable people. Actual Satanists reject any connection to him. Liz Bradley of the Satanic Temple said people are trying to blame their religion because it's easier than talking about mental health. She said real Satanists focus on empathy, compassion, justice, and personal autonomy. They don't actually believe in Satan as a literal being. She said nothing about their beliefs aligned with what happened in that house, and honestly, she isn't wrong in the slightest. For the community in Clemmings, the case forced a reckoning. Neighbors realized how many warning signs they had actually seen but never reported, from animal sacrifices to the exact condition of the home. Many said that they were shocked that something so violent had been happening so close to them. The push for the demolition of the house came from a desire to reclaim normalcy, but it also heightened how easy people look away from the struggles of others. Gillespie said that the real story is not the symbols on the walls. It was the way that the people in the house were allowed to just disappear, and the damage that spread through the community long before the bodies were found. After the arrests, the house on Nob Hill Drive became a symbol of everything that the community had ignored. Neighbors had known about the smell, the noise, the fights, and the animals, but no one expected what investigators actually found. Once the bodies were recovered, the county condemned the property. Officials said that the structure was unsafe and the interior was beyond repair. The conditions inside made it impossible to salvage. People said that they couldn't drive past it without feeling sick, and others said it was a reminder of how long the warning signs had been overlooked. The house sat empty for months while legal processes were moving forward. Windows were boarded, the yard grew wild, and reporters filmed it from the streets. It became a place where people slowed down to stare at, even though there was nothing left inside. In April of 2015, the house was eventually torn down. Crews arrived early in the morning and worked throughout the day until nothing remained but a cleared lot. Some neighbors watched from their driveways. Others said that they stayed inside because they didn't want to see any of it. For many, the demolition felt like the first step towards reclaiming the neighborhood. The lot was later sold, and the space where the house once stood became an empty patch of grass. The physical structure was gone, but the story stayed with the people who live around it. And so the end of Pazuzu Algarad is a case that is defined less by the occult and more by years of neglect. It's a reminder of what happens when mental illness goes untreated and when every warning sign is ignored. Pazuzu was deeply mentally unstable. He needed supervised psychiatric care long before any of this happened. He had schizotypical personality disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, alcohol dependence, and severe anxiety. Those conditions shaped a mind that was already fragile, and over time he built a persona that fed on fear and attention. But instead of getting help, he was just left to spiral. His mother did look for other ways and even encouraged parts of the fantasy. By the time he reached adulthood, the damage was already set in place. From early 2000s onward, his behavior grew more erratic and more dangerous. Friends all saw the red flags, they all heard the threats, they watched the house fall apart, and yet no one stepped in. No one took him seriously until it was too late. Real people died because of that silence. Josh Wetzler, Tommy Welch, Joseph Chandler. Their deaths were preventable. The police had received multiple tips about bodies in the yard. They had contact with Pazuzu more than once. He was put on probation without supervision and without treatment. Every system that could have intervened failed to do so. And whether Pazuzu had more victims is something we honestly will probably never know. He told all sorts of stories while he was drunk and high about killing people, but with him dead, the truth is kind of buried with him. Most people never took what he said at face value, and they were wrong to do so. So how many other bodies are there really out there? And even though Amber Burch made her own choices and took part in the harm, she's kind of a victim as well. She was shaped by years of exposure to him from the time that she was 15. His influence was strong, and he was known to be manipulative and abusive. In the end, the case is not about Satan. It's about a community that looked away, a family that didn't intervene, and a system that missed every chance to stop a tragedy. It's a story about what happens when people fall through every crack and no one reaches in to pull them back out. Thank you for wandering down this crooked path with me. Remember, sometimes the most frightening things are those that lurk in our own minds. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and allow the mysteries to guide you. This is Amanda Joy, signing off. Follow the path further. If this episode left you lingering in the shadows, there's more to explore. Follow at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and updates on upcoming episodes. Every post is another breadcrumb deeper into the strange, the forgotten, and the beautifully unsettling. Stay curious and keep walking.